guests this evening for our sort of panel discussion. Is it still a panel discussion if it's two moderators and two guests, or does it become something else?
Sure.
It's a panel discussion. We're going to discuss. Okay, let's go. Glenda, do you want to introduce our first panelist?
I would love to. So I would like to introduce Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben has been on the show a couple times before. He's an incredible person. We love Dr. Ben. You may recognize him from YouTube, which is like he's on a bunch of shows on YouTube that live stream. That's a lot of emotional labor to do the shows that he does. So Dr. Ben is a trailblazing resident physician on a mission to bridge the gap between the medical world and the public. Dr. Ben brings a unique perspective to the field as a trans man, weaving personal experiences and professional expertise to communicate current issues in medicine with authenticity and empathy. As a proud member of the LGBTQ plus community, Dr. Ben understands the importance of representation in healthcare. He's breaking down barriers and fostering understanding by sharing his journey as a trans man in the medical field. Dr. Ben is not just a doctor, he's a voice for inclusivity, diversity, and compassionate care. Dr. Ben is a regular contributor to the conversation on online programs such as the Transatlantic Call-In Show, woohoo, Talk Heathen, and his own channel, Family Dr. Ben, where he addresses medicine, skepticism, and LGBTQ plus rights. We love Dr. Ben so much. Yay, Dr. Ben!
Yay, super
I'm here.
excited.
I was gonna do something fun, but I ran out of absinthe, so I can't light it on fire, and I'm upset. But instead, I have a shot glass that says liquid twerk on it, and that's almost as good. So
Agreed.
In my neck of the woods, we always say huzzah, so we're gonna huzzah.
Yes.
Huzzah!
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 Excellent. Okay, I love it. Almost as good as if it was on fire. We can pretend. All right. Well, let me then introduce our second panelist. We have joining us for the first appearance. He's been in RfRx before, but not as a guest. We have Jonathan Roudabush, who graduated from San Francisco State University with a BA in political science in 1980. After university, he joined the U.S. Navy as an officer and served for over 12 years. Thank you for your service. In November 1999, he came out to himself, and he had kept being gay, buried, and in denial for 40 plus years, always dismissing his urges as ridiculous. And while he was in the Navy, this was probably the most traumatic time, as he believed he was dishonoring himself. When he finally came out to family members and then friends, they were all supportive. Yes, wonderful. I am so pleased to hear that and cannot wait to hear more about your story. And his journey out of religion and supernatural belief was a short one, having always been exposed to many humanists and atheists and never much a fan of the God concept in the first place. He followed many pagan traditions, but found that it didn't really work unless you counted the hits and ignored the misses. And so whereas many religious people might compare the experience of deconversion to jumping off of a cliff, Jonathan stepped off a curb from religious to atheist in 2021, finding that he was most of the way there already. Jonathan is now a volunteer at Recovering from Religion, as well as the atheist community of Austin, and he can be found in the ACD, the Atheist Community of Discord. So go find him there, and welcome, John. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yes, I'm glad you're here, and I'm so glad that you were able to join us this week so we can have kind of new discussion and new conversation following on our episode 2 weeks ago. It's really nice to get to hear different voices and see how diverse the community is. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm one of the stodgy old men of the gay community. I'm a G person for the letters. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, we should talk about that. Let's actually tell you what, let me pull up the poll and let's talk about the letters.
That's great, Kara. Yes, we should.
Yes, that's actually a great segue icebreaker. So the question was, well, here, I'll go over the first one. The first question was, have your views on the LGBTQ plus community changed over time? 71% of people said yes, positively. No one's views have changed negatively. 18% of people said that their views have changed a little bit, but not necessarily more positive or negative, just changed. 4% of people said no change. And 7% of people said, I don't know, or haven't thought about it. Now, for the question we were just talking about, if you were or are queer, which letter are you or would you be? 12% of people picked the L, which stands for what?
Lesbian.
Lesbian, yes. 31% of people picked G, which John mentioned stands for gay. Yep. 20, yay! We're doing well on our quiz. It gets harder. 27% of people selected the B, which is bisexual. Does that one stand for anything else?
No, just bisexual.
I don't think so.
I don't
Just
think so.
bisexual.
Yeah, it's
Okay, I
bisexual.
don't think so either. But you know, it changes. Even I get confused. Okay, I'm in the letters and I get confused sometimes. It's okay. We're all learning and growing, and that is a good thing. Okay, 23% picked T, which is trans. So yay. And yay. Yes, that one is definitely part of the acronym, and everyone is welcome here. Okay, 23% picked Q. Now that is one that does have multiple choices. Want to list them?
All of the priors plus, it's queer.
Yes.
So the word is rather ubiquitous as far as it goes. It really kind of covers, all the LGBTQ, not Q, but it is queer. So LGBT plus the intersexed, asexual, polysexual, whatever kink is your kink, all that is kind of, if you consider yourself queer, that's kind of like all of us put together, the entire community, which I think is, it's the catch-all term. And so someone might call themselves queer and just be non-binary, or they might be just a person who's working on it. They're not real sure where they're at, and it just gives them a way of being part of the community.
And I'm really glad that we brought up queer, because if anyone is from an older generation or has recently deconstructed, the term queer might evoke negative feelings because it was used as a slur for such a long time. And sometimes hearing words that have been used as a slur, it can be difficult when they're being reclaimed to get comfortable with them again. I love queer as a term for myself, and in my generation, in my community, queer is just like a great umbrella term, and we love umbrella terms. They're short, they're sweet, they cover everything. And so queer is a really wonderful term. And I also wanted to touch real quick on, for a little bit of gay history for everybody, queer history, on why is it in that order. There is a very important reason why the L is first, with, lesbian, LGB, lesbian, gay, lesbians, historically, when I'm so sorry that I don't have like a Wikipedia link right now to put in the chat on why, on who coined the term and why it happened first, but it's because lesbians were the ones during the AIDS epidemic and before who were holding space for the gay community and gay men of providing community support and protection. So the gay men put L first with the LGBTQ as a nod of respect and reverence towards the lesbian community.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's a great point.
There's lots of, queer history is so broad, and there's so much to know, and there's lots of little really wonderful moments like that, that kind of, unless unless you're in it, you probably don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thanks for adding that. And we'll find some links to pull for that too. So let's see, that was the Q. Yes, the Q, the umbrella, the catch-all. And then somebody else mentioned in the chat also that Q in some communities stands for questioning. I remember that as well in like the 90s and 2000s. It meant questioning, and I think it still does for some people. So there's that too. And then we had the I, which we talked about earlier, is for intersex. No one has selected that today, but it is absolutely a part of the community and is a substantial number of people.
There are just as many intersex people as there are redheads. And again, for anyone who doesn't know, what does intersex mean? Intersex means that you are born with both male or female. Either you can have a mix of chromosomes, you can have a mix of reproductive organs. Actually, I don't know why I'm answering this question when Dr. Ben is right here. I'm so sorry.
No, I have a few videos on this topic, and a few specific ways that this process plays out. I have some more surface level videos. I also have some more in-depth videos addressing which particular points of development are affected. Some of the videos I have are a little bit contentious because there's a myth around that people develop as female first. Everybody does, and then differentiate, and that is not true. Everybody is initially neutral. Everybody starts off as a neutral sex, and then differentiation happens. And it's pretty fascinating. And there actually are plenty of people in our own community who are intersex, and being intersex does not mean that you can't identify as these other labels. In fact, I don't know if any of you know Polymathic Jen, who's in as a smaller channel. She's from Australia. She's very openly intersex, but also identifies as a trans woman because she was assigned male at birth, despite being intersex, and then has transitioned medically and socially to presenting feminine and identifying as a woman. And so you can, even if you don't already, if you're not already assigned to one of the two boxes, you can still be trans. And that goes to show these labels are very much a way for you to identify yourself, and not as much of people trying to categorize you into something. So if there's something that is a term that resonates with you, but you don't know if you're the right person to fit that the rest of the people don't matter. Like, that's for you to represent yourself. So, but I encourage you, if people are curious, to go watch my videos on various varieties of sexual development, because it's fascinating stuff.
Yes, I highly recommend that. And I want to reemphasize on why the eye is so important, is that for those who don't know, again, if you're intersex, there are no federal, even in this country, there might be some countries in which there are surgeries are performed on intersex babies, like genital surgery without their consent, and to like, oh, here's some ambiguous genitals, let's make it one way or the other, without knowing the gender. Obviously you don't know your gender until like later in life, and so it's a really important issue because there needs to be more protections for these children before they're even able to consent to these gender reassignment surgeries that are being done on them as infants.
And it's interesting how the conversation, primarily by religious proponents, like or the more restrictive laws out there, like they use the argument of children to oppose LGBTQ rights and primarily trans rights. And they'll say, well, think of the children. They don't even know themselves yet. How can you possibly do a surgery on a minor? Meanwhile, they are simultaneously advocating for genital surgeries on younger minors that don't even have a concept of their gender because they don't fit a particular box. And so it's like there's a distinct difference here with the trans community saying that age shouldn't be the only like limiting factor for people who consent to a procedure and to undergo rigorous screening to determine if it's appropriate for them. So when
Also
people
circumcision.
Yeah, also
and
circumcision. Oh my God.
yeah. So the whole children don't know themselves well enough to make a decision. Like, I agree, but which population are you using that for? And it's not the trans kids who are fighting every day for their identities. It's like they're trying to do that to even younger people who have no concept of consenting to that.
Yeah. So check out Dr. Ben's videos. And if you want to like drop some of those for us in the chat or in our
Yeah,
Google Doc,
yeah,
we can share
definitely.
them. Yeah, that would be awesome. We like education here. Okay, let's see. Did we get through all the letters? No, we've got a couple of letters left. Let's see. That was the I. We got to the A, and 27% of people selected A. And as we talked about earlier, that can stand for asexual, agender, or ally. I think are there any others that stands for?
I do think ally is a little bit of a dated inclusion
Yeah,
term.
I'm old, Glenda.
No, you're not. You're young. Don't give me that old stuff. Until you start having arthritis everywhere, you're not old.
I
I have a
look at these hands. This is
rheumatologist.
early onset arthritis. I'm already there.
I
I'm
will
so
give
sorry.
I will give a little bit of a disclaimer to some of my videos. I was very early in my transition when I started my channel, and I'm a little squeaky, and it's kind of funny actually. But
I love that. Okay, so
Okay, we're gonna have to use those as blackmail tapes.
I mean, they're
love it.
public, they're available to watch, so I could always take
No,
them
what we have
down.
to do is like put them like an OnlyFans thing, Dr. Ben squeaks, or something.
I would happily monetize my pre-transition videos, even.
I was gonna
That's
Just
say,
pay
hey,
awesome.
me.
another
I don't
income
care. It's
stream.
all stuff's already public. Like, I'll take the money.
Right.
There you
Oh,
go.
that's great. Okay, so we've got, in addition to that, the plus. I'm glad we did include that because it was selected by some people, 4%. And that was intended there. We mentioned about the Q standing for queer, which is kind of an umbrella catch-all term, but also the plus is there too, in case you didn't feel that the other letters fully captured your identity, or like we talked about at the beginning too, it could also refer to a preference, or I think some, is it true, John, you were saying some polyamorous people will identify as kind of plus, but not necessarily in any of the other categories?
Yeah, the poly. I don't know a lot of poly people, and I wish Helen was here. But it's kind of the ones I do know. They are a little hesitant to put themselves in any particular category. So
I
yeah,
I
they're
am a proud polyam person, and there is great discussion on whether or not it's an orientation, and I am hesitant too. I mean, I'm in the queer community because I am queer, but and there is discrimination and stigma around being polyamorous, but like if a cisgender straight dude is including himself in the queer community because he's polyamorous, I'm gonna have feelings about that, and I that's just my own personal take. I don't think in my entire polycule, I don't, while we don't consider being polyamorous, a lot of us don't consider it a choice. We do consider it kind of like our orientation. It doesn't mean that you're queer or involved in the LGBT. You can be an absolute like heterosexual straight person who is also polyamorous. And again, that doesn't mean there's not stigma and judgment, but there's different discrimination against you. And I would have problems about somebody just like, oh yeah, look, I'm in the queer community. Like,
Yeah, and with that, there's another argument that's floating around that let's try to include other groups into the LGBTQ plus community that don't belong there, namely try to assign pedophilia to the community, and that is not accepted because that is not consensual. We are only supportive of consensual and people who actually are able to consent to those relationships, and so that is not a legitimately accepted part of the community, and that's something that we have to apply our skepticism towards, because on the one hand, like, we want to be very inclusive, but we have to be careful that we're not so inclusive that we're including people that are causing harm.
It's also, if you study the history, it's literally a tactic to discredit LG. It's like,
Yes.
Yep.
it's not, it wasn't actually like
It's
pedophiles who are like,
the
oh, we're
whole
trying to
gays
like
against
lump ourselves
groomers
in.
thing.
It's tactics done by alt-right communities to discredit. They do the same things with feminism. Like if you see,
Mm.
it's called rage bait. That's this kind of specific term, rage bait to, we're going to pump out like all of this disinformation, this misinformation to make you have these opinions about certain ideologies. Like feminists say that babies can't consent to changing their diaper. It's like, no, feminists don't actually believe that. Nobody's fucking believing this. Like this is made up to make us seem so radical that you don't want to, like, I don't want to be a feminist. They're crazy and they believe in wild things. I don't want to support the gay community anymore, the LGBT community anymore, because they think that being a pedophilia is a valid sexual orientation. The people churning out that information are alt-right trolls.
Yep.
Who are trying to say that this is what gay. Nope. In the actual queer community, nobody is supporting that or saying that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
if you really wanted to go on a deep dive, you just go to the subreddit, are not a drag queen.
Mm-hmm.
Not a drag queen, and see like all the people who are getting arrested for pedophilia and harm on children. There's a bunch of like youth pastors and Christians and alt-right people, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. Problem's not us. That's
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
whole litter boxes and classrooms thing. It's an interesting thing. I had a fun discussion on Transatlantic a couple weeks ago with somebody who was clearly a troll. Who is there are a lot of people that are will bring up the arguments of, well, people who identify as insert animal here, and there's a lot of different people within, especially the non-binary umbrella. And my whole response to this was like, so what? Like, what does this change about your interaction with this person? Um, like, if they're being honest, they're being respectful, they're not hurting anybody else, and they take the time and vulnerability to tell you, hey, this is how I see myself and how I want to exist in this world that we're all stuck in together. Like, there's some nuance there with certain people who may identify with symbolism related to certain animal traits, or some people who take that literally. But at the end of the day, like, it really shouldn't matter, because this person has said, hey, this is how this is how you can address me to where I feel respected. And if you tell me that you identify with a certain animal and this is how you want me to address you, I don't really see harm in respecting that for you personally.
Right. Like, I know a lot of people who identify as being or having an incorporeal soul or spirit, and that's not a thing that I think exists, but we can still treat people who have that belief respectfully and not let that impact our interaction.
Yeah, I would agree. We just don't want to have an association with people who are causing harm or
Yep.
who are imposing themselves on non-consenting anything. So, that goes to a lot of various people. But again, if you want to figure out who does the most pedophilia, look at the Catholic Church, because even in Illinois, I think it was Illinois, in nonprofits, we did a thing on this, but in Illinois, they had the research on it says that over 180,000 victims from the Catholic diocese there. And it's like, okay, now let's see how many queer people, I don't know any myself, and I don't think I've really searched the criminal databases to see how many there were, but I don't think it's more than maybe 0.1% or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's timely information to bring up, because why do we have Pride Month? Why are we doing this Pride panel? Why are we here talking about this? Because our rights are still on the chopping block, even in a country that has legal gay marriage and those things. Like, and these tactics to discredit the LGBTQ plus community, to don't please think about the children, and what about the children, and we can't, trans people are coming after your children and gay people are coming after your children, when these religious institutions are the ones doing the egregious
The
harm
damage.
upon
Yeah.
and damage upon children. And even in a quote unquote progressive country, which we aren't really. I mean, yes,
No,
we
no,
are.
we're
We are.
very conservative.
But
Yeah.
there are more of us than there, like actually, when you look at population demographics, and that's an entire separate social science of looking at like population demographic, just like more people support access to abortion than oppose. But the reason
About
gerrymandering and all those
60,
things.
68, 70%, something like that.
Yeah, so it's not, anyway, we're not necessarily the minority, but this is why we're having these discussions, because we're not these rights don't just happen. They are just free and here and accessible for everybody. And the Project 2025 is the most terrifying, horrible thing. And if you haven't looked it up, you need to look it up. It's coming for all of our rights. And as queer people, we are definitely
And
under
not just queer people either. It's coming for everybody's
for
rights. So
everybody,
this
for
is something that,
everybody. So it's
they
very,
really
very
need to be
scary.
paying attention.
Mm-hmm. It's
Yeah.
very
Well,
scary.
and kind of to your point, I liked how you were mentioning too, how people will try to like smuggle things in and discredit the community. But, as we just kind of talked about going over all of these letters and what they stand for and how it has changed over time. And some of the letters stood for one thing and now they stand for something else, and they've been moved in different orders and we've added some. And there's conversation going on in the chat about, well, does kink and BDSM fall into this? Does it not? And we're constantly kind of renegotiating these identities. And I know a lot of times people will kind of use that as a way to say, oh, well, this isn't a real thing. This is something people have just made up. Look, they can't even agree amongst themselves. But first it was this, then it was that. Well, no. The issue is that the idea that people have to be all one way is the problematic concept. We have had to come up with these terms to describe people who are divergent from this very unnatural idea, trying to claim everyone needs to be, straight, cisgender, all of this, heteronormative ideology. Is really the issue. People are quite diverse, and we use language to serve us, to help us describe things more accurately, but we're not bound by it. We're trying to find better ways to explain people's experience. And on that topic, I thought we could segue into one of our discussion topics, which was when and how did you know that you were not exactly straight, or that you were perhaps one of the letters in the alphabet? And let's see, who wants to go first on that one?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I can remember, the earliest memory I have of this, and I'm pushing 67, so I'm 66 right now. So, it was in the early 60s. Uh, I was at school, and it was, I think, fourth grade. And we went to some friends of mine, and one was a fifth grader, so he was the older guy. Went to the library, and he looked up. He wanted to show us something, so he showed us Boy's Life, and it had some naked guys in there because they were out on a hiking thing. It was all about nature and all that. And so he was au naturel, and the conversation shifted to, this really kind of turns me on, and I'm sitting there going, what? And, so, but then I kind of said, yeah, it does, so it was like, from there on, I kind of knew what was going on. I very rapidly found out that one does not speak about these things. During that time, uh, well, yeah, it had already happened that I had been molested by a Catholic priest who was the uncle of my friends next door, and also a babysitter. So it was who she was there because my mother was in the hospital because she had endometriosis and almost died at the birth of my youngest little brother. So it was very, very confusing to me at that point because I had all this happen. And before that, and then this happened in the fourth grade, and that was in third grade. So and we were in Pittsburgh for the third grade, and we were in Palo Alto, California, for the fourth grade. So it's like all those sorts of things that happen to you kind of create your early onset mental pathways. So I was very confused about gender and gender roles. But I learned very quickly that kids are very, very cruel when you violate their conception or their parents' conception of what is normal. So, and what is okay. And I learned very, very quickly that it's not okay for any of these things to happen. So I, of course, didn't tell anybody about any of it. And I kept to myself what my own feelings were. And by the time I was a teenager, I buried them pretty deep emotionally. And that's where they stayed until I was 42 years old. So, yeah. And that was so when you look at things like when did you know, there's a little bit of gray area there because there were probably times that I knew before that, but that's the only thing I remember. That's what sticks out in my mind, and the fact that I was being very confused about the whole thing before puberty. So it's like, everybody has their stories, but mine kind of was interesting in that sense. And in the meantime, when I was not just a closeted denial about being gay, I actually avoided any kind of sexual contact my entire life. I've had some because of social needs, that sort of thing. I put that in my bio that, but it was definitely, I was ace basically most of my life. And until I met my current husband 25 years ago. So, it's, I think that it's not an unusual story, but it is, my story. So, and I really think that if people really allowed kids to be kids, and let them explore whatever they are, um, they wouldn't grow up confused and getting a lot of these. Like I said, I have more hangups than a telemarketer. Just get rid of the things that lead into that. Now, I was not talking to my parents about any of this. I did talk to my cousin Brent a little bit, who, as it turns out, when he went through puberty, I knew him as kids, but when he went through puberty, he came out as gay when he was like 20. So then the family disowned him and blah, blah, blah. My family didn't because my dad was a humanist. And, so Brent was fine. He did beat up on his older brother every time he started talking. I don't like his lifestyle. One of the proudest moments of my life, one of the proudest memories of my life is when my dad took his elder brother apart for saying that, and I sat there going, "Go, Dad," So it was like, and but and so anyway, that's mine, and I'll let somebody else talk now.
Yeah, no, but I just want to say thank you for sharing that. That was really personal and difficult. And I think you made a really good point at the end there that, yeah, that's your story, but also that is common. I don't know the exact statistics. I think estimates vary, but people who are members of the LGBTQ plus community are disproportionately more likely to be victims of assault and other kinds of crimes. So yes, that is something that has probably happened to a lot of people. So thank you for sharing that with us for those that may have also
Yeah.
experienced similar things and had all kinds of negative feelings about it.
Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah.
switch my ears out here.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And let's hear from Dr. Ben next. Do you have any comments on
Yeah.
John's comment? And would you like to tell us when you knew you were not exactly? Yeah.
So there I was, an evangelical fundamentalist Christian. Several times throughout my childhood, there were, well, I guess like into my adolescence, everybody had the fun sex talk in their youth group of like, just don't do that because you're a used piece of gum. Nobody wants you, all that fun stuff. I didn't really care about that because I was like, I don't want guys anyway. I didn't think anything out at the time. I was like, why would I ever want to be in any of this relationship anyway, whatever. And I was kind of like disgusted a little bit by the fact that like I was expected to. I thought you were just supposed to be in a relationship with a dude, if you were assigned female. But I was just like, okay, yeah, whatever. This is just a thing. I don't care too much. We kind of go on and like, you have the other talks in your youth group about like, hey, if you ever think that you're gay, just tell Jesus that you're not and you won't be anymore. And I was like, oh man, I'm so happy that's not me. Look at all these other people who are sinners. And anyway, I thought it was so cool. And then later on, things just keep coming up and I find out more things in the church about my role in society as someone who is assigned to be a woman. I was like, okay, I don't like this. Like, so I'm supposed to be with a man and he is supposed to be in charge and I can't do anything about it. And I was like, what if I don't? What if I don't? And that's separate from the fact that like the rest of my discovery happened after that. But that was my first footstep into the world of feminism. And that was kind of the first thing that needed to happen was like, okay, maybe I'm not secondary to other people. Maybe I'm just as legitimate as my own person. And then after that, that keeps going. And I was sort of the way that society talks about relationships is very problematic. And this had an impact on me for a long time and prevented me from meeting myself because I saw people, especially on the internet, who were like airing their dirty laundry about their relationships in public. And usually it was a woman talking shit about the guy. And there's this whole trope in media about like how the woman is never happy. And that's okay. That's normal. You just deal with it. And I was like, okay, you don't have to like this other person. You just do it. And so I put myself into relationships with godly men that my parents would have been absolutely happy with. And I was like, I feel nothing. I'm not happy with this, but like I guess it's okay if I'm miserable because it doesn't matter what I think. Um, and then I went to college. The first thing started to fall after, my initial encounters with feminism. Switched from my theater degree to a biology degree, learned a bit about evolution. It was like, okay, hold on, there's more things that don't make sense with what I was taught. And I met some queer people and I was like, hey, these people are actually normal people. And I heard their stories. And more things happened. And then I ended up in a relationship with a dude who was like, would have been the perfect guy for me. Like, master's in history, had like a well-paying job, like super attractive. And like, I do think he's attractive. And this is like my sexuality has kind of changed like over the years, and I'll get into that. But like, this person would have been like the absolute perfect person for me. And I just was not feeling it. I was like, I enjoy being around you. I enjoy being really good friends with you. Just like I physically do not feel a connection. Um, and it turns out I had some friends that were women, and I was like, oh fuck. They're really hot. And I didn't know what to do with myself. I was like, okay. So I guess I am that person that I was happy I wasn't many years ago. I was like, okay, well, we got to deal with that at this point. And I just kind of buried that I buried that thought. I was like, okay, you know, maybe I'm not straight. Processed that a bit more, and I was like, okay, you know, I'm really not straight. And that just kept spiraling. Finally had a conversation with one of the good friends that I had met who was openly identifying as a lesbian, and I was like, hey, your experience sounds very similar to mine. I don't know what this means for me, but it sounds like we're very similar. And of course, she like had known about herself for a while, and you know, when you're already past like that point in your own journey, you know that you can't force discovery on somebody else. They have to get there on their own. And she knew that, and she like helped me get there on my own, and I did. And that was around the time that I had not only come out to a lot of people as lesbian, but also came out as atheist, because at that point, I did not want to fulfill the gender role that I was assigned. And, you know, I had already had enough doubts with regard to biology and evolution. And then now the final straw was broken that I could not go back to this community and be accepted. Like, even if God existed, I could not make him love me in the way that I needed him to. And so I was like, fuck it. Like, there's no way I can reconcile this. I should just own it. And so I did, and I was much happier. There's still something that wasn't quite in alignment. And this is something that took a bit more discovery, because of course you go from I'm not that gay person, that can't be me, to then you start thinking about previous experiences in your life, about um how as a kid, like, you always were hanging out with the guys, and like that's not unusual. But then you notice the fact that you play video games and were showing up on these platforms under an alias, and convincing people that you were in fact a guy, and had incredible enjoyment out of doing that. And you were like, hey, that life is better than the one that I currently have. I like that person better than this one. And you're like, hold on a sec. That's a thing. There are people that live like that. They choose the life that is the right one for them, and they make that the real one. And I didn't know any trans people prior to going to college, and then I didn't even transition or even come out to myself until after my first year of med school. So it's pretty recent, but I had to wrestle with that whole thing of, am I like, I wondered if I was non-binary or if I was a binary trans man. And then in addition, I had to kind of sift out, am I not a woman, or am I just opposed to the way that women are treated in our society? And that's a very delicate conversation that I think a lot of people who are assigned female have to go through, because it's all garbage.
It is all garbage.
It's all
Yes.
garbage. And
Ugh.
I know people that have come out of that experience saying that, no, like, I am a woman, but I am this authentic, strong, powerful, independent woman. And there are plenty of people that are like that. And I wasn't. And I ended up, the way that I've figured this out for myself, I was like, okay, if gender expression can be anything, if your identity can be any combination of anything, like, what makes me like a woman or not? What makes me a man or not? Like, how do I sift through these definitions? And so I took two of the same thing. In this case, it was Vikings, because Vikings are cool, and you can have very badass female Vikings, and you can have very badass male Vikings. And it's like, the difference here is, what body do they have? And I was like, I want this one. And that happened to be the one that I was not assigned at birth. So, and so I was like, okay, maybe this is it. And then I just kind of leaned into it. And then the more I leaned into it, I was like, okay, no, this is comfortable. This is it. And so it's a long word salady explanation of everything. But I feel like for people who are trans or people who are questioning a trans or non-binary identity, it's very hard to reach that, especially with how nebulous and gray things can be. But you kind of have to find your own tricks to sifting out where you think you are, and you might change your mind multiple times. And with that, I did notice, and I've noticed this with quite a few people, my sexuality changed after starting testosterone. So I was just forever meant to be gay because I previously was not attracted at all to masculinity. And then I was on testosterone for a little over a year, and then I was like, no, I like both. I like lots of things. And so it's very interesting. And I don't know exactly what part of that was related to like hormonal influence and what part of it was related to self-awareness and self-acceptance and like being more open to different things. And I'm sure it's a combination of the above, but that just goes to show like you don't have to pick one label for life or like any combination of labels for life. Like you're dynamic, everybody's a very dynamic person. Um, and I think all that anybody asks of you is to be honest and to tell us how we can best respect you and best support you. And if that's the same every day, then awesome. If it's not the same every day, just I hope that people trust me enough to tell me. Um, but otherwise, like if you go by a different name every single day of your life, like I just want to be informed, but I'd be excited for everyone.
Yeah, I was so hoping that when we talked about this question, we would get to hear someone discuss kind of like not really knowing for sure and having to figure it out. And you totally delivered on that because we get that question all the time. A lot of times, even just in our RfRx episodes, people in the chat are talking about like, hey, I'm not really sure. I think I might identify as this, or maybe I'm gay, maybe I'm non-binary, but like, how do I know? And like, this is so common, and I think that your story really touched on a lot of those intersections where certain kinds of religious background can make it even more difficult for people. Where you mentioned kind of growing up in an environment where being queer is kind of unthinkable. It's something that it's a choice that's not even presented to you, and it's intentionally kind of kept out of your awareness. And then I don't know if you experienced this as well, but I was really kind of following along with your story going, yep, yep, yep. But like being raised, assigned female at birth in an evangelical background, there's a very particular kind of training that you get in what your gender role will be. And part of it oftentimes is to question yourself and assume that I am not the authority on myself. I should not be trusting myself. My thoughts and opinions and feelings are probably invalid. And I don't know if it was the case for you, but I know for me that added an extra step of having to kind of figure out, oh no, wait, actually my experience is my experience and it's okay for me to have that and recognize that I don't need someone else's permission, or it doesn't need to be revealed to me by someone else.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. The way your the way you were socialized impacts how you engage with society. Like it's not even a profound thing. Like we know that that's a case. Like we know that the way you're raised impacts that. But especially for trans people, it's very interesting because like in my particular situation, and I know many trans women will say the opposite, um, like I was raised to be quiet, to sit in the back, to not speak first, and all of that. And so then transitioning and integrating myself into a man's gender role is very interesting because there's so much confidence that you're essentially competing against these people who were told that their voice matters, and you were always told that yours didn't. But you look the same. You're treated the same. And it's very difficult to be in that spot feeling like you don't belong there. And I think that that's something though that spans the whole spectrum of trans identities. I think there are points where every side of that is told you don't belong here, and you have to face that for yourself. I know from many trans women, and the ones here can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but the very pervasive arguments of this is a women's space, you don't belong here, or like you have the privilege of being a man in society. Why would you ever adopt this inferior role? And them feeling like they don't belong there. And then from our side, from the trans mass side, of being told we don't belong here. And for a lot of us, I don't think many people 100% or even 90% or even 80% know where they fit on that spectrum. And that's the same with sexuality. I don't think anybody is there. And I think a lot of people that maybe portray that do so after years even of like learning about themselves and growing into their identities. And so you shouldn't see somebody years down the road and say they seem so sure of themselves. Like, no, they went through this as well, most likely. And just because you are not 100% sure doesn't mean that you don't fit. It also doesn't mean that you're stuck if you do go down that route, because almost nothing is permanent. There are some physical changes with hormone therapy that can be permanent, but that doesn't mean that you are forever a certain identity. It doesn't mean that you're stuck. And with that, even so, a lot of early stages of hormone therapy are reversible. Like, you're not going to instantly masculinize overnight on testosterone. The first thing that's going to happen is like emotional changes. And so some of those things, like, you can try things out and feel the freedom to socially transition, socially, like, pick a group of friends, say, this is a name that I'm thinking about. Can you use this for me? Like, for right now, can you use these pronouns? Like, I'm going to change my hairstyle. Like, even if you find a friend, like, hey, can you go pick out clothes with me? Like, just explore who you are. And like, the label doesn't matter. The label can come later. Just figure out, like, the first step is, what do I like? And then try it. And if you try it and you say, not for me, then that's cool. You learned something about yourself. You don't have to do it again. And if you say, yeah, no, I really like this, I'm going to lean into it, then you have answers and you can go forward. But you don't need an answer now. You don't ever need a set answer. Like, you are you. Your label helps communicate who you are, but you don't need a label. You don't need any of that. And so I hope, like, there's a lot of stuff here, but the lack of certainty is expected. And I hope people aren't discouraged because of a sense of uncertainty.
Yeah, great points. Go ahead, John. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's not just it depends an awful lot also on the culture of when you were born.
Yep.
When I was raised in the 60s and 70s, I graduated high school in 1976. Um, it it makes a difference because one of the reasons I was closeted for so long is the absolute stigma associated with it, and the terrorism associated with it. You didn't even have to be gay; they just had to call you gay to get yourself beat up in a locker room. Somebody tried. I was bigger than he was. He ended up running out of this, but that's just another thing entirely. But yeah, and so you are programmed just like religion programs you today, but this was the entire society. It only started changing when Stonewall happened, and that was a gradual change. Being gay was not truly started to be accepted until the 90s, not the late 60s. So it took, 20 some odd years for that to start being normalized.
Yeah, and even
And
then, like the 90s was not like it
Oof.
was.
no, it
I mean,
wasn't
I grew up
great.
in
No.
I grew up in Tennessee, and it was for you to be out and gay in like a high school. I graduated high school in 2008, and to be out and gay in high school was like it was
Not a thing.
not
Yeah.
fucking acceptable.
Yeah. That would not have happened. You would have had to be sent to a special education place or something, because they
And that
wouldn't
was
let
in
do it.
2008. So, people, I mean, different cultural experiences across the United States. Now that I've lived on the West Coast, I have a lot of friends who grew up on the West Coast, and it really wasn't that we're the same age, and it wasn't that big of a deal for them. But if you grow up in more religious areas, it is not the same experience. You weren't even in my church. It was not acceptable to watch Friends because there was a gay character in the show.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Far be it, you should see Will and Grace, right?
Oh yeah.
And that's not even getting into like they're just tropes of gay character, like they're just tropes of
Yeah,
gay people. They're not
I
actually, it's
know.
not
They're not
actually
real
like
ones.
proper queer representation.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well,
Yeah,
and
I
that's
know it goes there.
yeah. That's actually a great point. I kind of wanted to talk about with y'all. Like what does positive sexuality and a positive outlook on identity look like? And how does that fit in with having a community that accepts you? And how do you build that? That's a lot of questions all put together. I should probably break that down. But um, Glenda, do you want to run with
Yeah,
that one?
I'd love to. I covered a little bit of my coming out story on the previous panel. And to do a very short, sweet TLDR, I grew up on a farm. I grew up a tomboy. I had a lot of internalized misogyny, and I rejected femininity because to be female meant you were stupid, and I was not stupid. And to be a woman meant you were weak and pathetic, and I didn't want to be those things. So I grew up very tomboy, and I went through what's referred to, the phenomenon is compulsory heterosexuality, which is that you just assume that you're straight. You just assume that that's what your experiences are. And I didn't come out until I was in my late 20s, after I had moved to Las Vegas, and I've worked full time as an entertainer for years, and being in dressing rooms with women, and like, oh, well, I'm not like not able to control myself, so I still don't think, like, yeah, I think women are beautiful, but I don't like, do I want to be them, or do I want to be with them? And it wasn't, I didn't embrace being queer or even consider myself queer until I literally started having sex with women, which was your question, Kara, which is positive sexuality. We've mentioned kink a little bit in the discussion and what kink means. And there's a lot of varying definitions. It's broad spectrum of things. Kink is it's just a very broad framework for someone's very specific types of sexuality. It can deal with power dynamics and power exchanges. It can be specific sexual things or non-sexual things that are tied to your sexuality that are important to you. And I'm in the queer, pansexual, polysexual, kink community, and it was through one of my partners who he had parties that had, sexual activity going on, where I was able to safely and comfortably explore sexuality with women, because I would have been too. Have you met women? They're incredible. Like I'm so intimidated. Like women are very, very, very intimidating because they're so beautiful and amazing and smell great and are soft and wonderful. And I definitely, living as a queer woman now, have appreciated the struggle that men go through of just like asking a woman out, like, oh my God, it's like, how do you even do it? I'm not worthy. So these events,
Yes, you are, by the way.
well,
Yes,
these
you are
events
worthy.
provided a space for me to like, oh, like, it's not like this one-on-one intimate environment in my house. it's just this like public play party, public, I mean, it's private, this like, but this play space that I can kind of explore. And it was literally only after I started like having sex with women, I'm like, oh, I actually really like this. And if you saw me digging through some papers earlier, like I have like all my old childhood drawings, and the amount of like sexualized women that I was drawing, like they're all fantasy. It's like mermaids and stuff, but they're all naked. They've all got like huge boobs. And it's just like, do I want to be them, or do I want to be with them? And realizing now it is a combination of both. And once I got past my internalized misogyny and embraced like this version of my gender, which for me, femininity for me and being a woman for me involved cutting off all my hair. And I'm a very tall I'm almost 6 feet. So I'm a dominant person. So for some people's definition of gender, I'm a masculine kind of, I can be seen as like a masculine kind of woman. But for me, this is the gender soup that I found for myself, that I feel like powerful and feminine. And the spectrum of my positive sexuality with my relationships of exploring, just being able the freedom to explore how that looked with different partners, and realizing that I am a spectrum of sexuality with different partners, and that and my queerness and how it gets represented. And I know I'm rambling now. It's so broad. It's really hard to kind of like narrow down, and there's so much to say about it. But positive sexuality for me, it really fundamentally comes down to sexuality without any guilt or shame, unless that's your thing.
I was going to say, unless, yeah.
Unless that's your thing. Free sexuality without guilt or shame. And that took a long time to kind of get to and find. And we demonize sexuality in all forms, but we especially demonize sexuality with women, right? Like women seeking sexual pleasure, women engaging in sexual pleasure. And for me, I have it somewhere. I have my purity pledge card that I keep around. For me, the reclamation of my positive sexuality has involved a lot of like kind of public sexual experiences and being in like safe community spaces, kink spaces, and queer spaces, and like sapphic, which means like lesbian spaces, and exploring sexuality there with that is so accepted and so normalized, and again without any guilt, fear, or shame. And that's been a really like transcendent, wonderful experience for me. And that's what positive sexuality looks like for me. But it is a lot to be in some people. The idea of having a sexual experience with more than one person at a time is way too much, and that's totally fine. I really don't want to suggest to anyone here that that is where you are going to find healing or where you're going to find your own exploration of self. It is just what has worked for me. But there's I mean, there's lots of different ways that people can come about like finding, especially after purity culture, of deconstructing compulsory heterosexuality, purity culture, sexual shame. There's just so much to say about it.
Yeah, I would agree. The one thing that, not having come from an evangelical background, my mother was a Unitarian Universalist, my father was a humanist and an atheist. So I was not inculcated into any kind of religious existence. And so, like my bio said, becoming an atheist was like stepping off a curb. I was more than halfway there to
I
begin
love
with.
that analogy, by the way.
But
Great.
well, I've used that when I was interviewing people for RfR too, when they were talking about a similar thing, and I said, I was just empathizing with them, saying, I know that because of their background, uh, one was a Catholic. That's when I came up with the term. It seems like you're stepping off a cliff, and you're not. And I said I can't relate completely to that because mine was like stepping off a curb. And they kind of like said, okay, but then we talk about it. But it's just
Right.
it's one of those things where people from my generation pretty much had the same kind of toxic gender normative things forced on us.
Women
We
do
were
this, men do this.
men do
These are your
this,
boxes.
and
These are the
you have to
rules.
be
And
a
there's
masculine guy, and
Mhm.
you can't be feminine, and you can't do, like when I was in high school, I took dance in high school. I
Gay,
was the only
gay,
guy. I was the
gay.
only guy in the dance class. And when I got jacked up against the locker in the locker room after dance class once, and that's the guy I turned around on. I was so pissed. I didn't care what happened. He ran away when he saw me get about ready to kill him. But you know, and one other guy was, you know, haha, you do dance, and I said, that's right, it's hard. You should try it. And then he said, oh, you're gay. You know, he used the F word. You know, and I said, no, I'm in a room full of girls in tights. Where are you during your PE class? You know, are you in football, going down to the field and grabbing each other's asses? You know,
That sounds really gay. And
that sounds really gay. You
this
know?
collective punishment for when anytime you navigate outside of your gender, of what the gender role you've been assigned, the collective punishment, you know, I just kind of accepted it for like, oh, you are unappealing to men. And part of me is like, good. I hate them. I fucking hate them. The last time I checked, they were all shitty to me. So because you know, growing up being bullied and teased relentlessly, I'm like, okay, well, you are not performing femininity the correct way. Men are not going to want you. And while I craved companionship, of course, and like everyone, I craved to be loved and craved to be touched, I was fine with where I was, with not being appealing towards anybody necessarily being sexually interested in me, because they all fucking sucked. So like it's fine. It's fine. I will find my own.
I've been there. I've been that guy who sucked, you know.
Right.
So,
And I think that's an experience a lot of queer people can have, of just, you know, like, you are not appealing to the gender that you're supposed to be appealing to. And I'm like, okay, like,
That's by design. I used to get that one a lot. You know, men don't like it if you do the following. I know.
Oh my God. I was, this is a short little story about it's amazing now of like performing gender roles and my own queerness, and like, do I perform? It's in my bio, and many of you know, I literally work as a model. I work as a professionally pretty person. So, and I was modeling at a club, you know, atmosphere modeling at a nightclub or whatever. And I had a guy come up to me and he literally, like, he looked me up and down and he goes, 7, but you'd be higher if you grew out your hair. I'd still fuck you though. And I just like, like, had this. First of all, my best friend at the time did the most amazing thing, which is she started just like screaming at the top of her head. I'm like, somebody has lost their child. Who has this unintended child? There's a lost child right here, indicating it was the greatest thing ever. But this idea of like,
that's so good.
it's not just your own gender and your own sexuality that you're kind of trying to navigate. People have judgment on like how appealing you are towards the gender that they think you are supposed to be attracting. Like,
Yeah.
And for me, this is the incarnation that makes me feel the prettiest and sexiest and whatever. Now I'm fitting a very, 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 very narrow, conventionally attractive paradigm of beauty. And I really want to acknowledge that. And like, I just want to like take time to acknowledge that, but not only are there rules for like your own gender for your own self, there are rules for how you attract the gender that I think you should be interested in. And there's just so much like social navigation to do. And
it's
it
tough.
can just get really
Both sides
complicated.
are tough. I tell you, it's like, you know, I was, you know, I was also objectified. It's really weird because I think that queer people must have some sort of pheromone or something, and people just feel like they can, you know, intrude on your space, you know. And I just even there were some women in high and college that just literally threw themselves at me.
Oh, it's
And I'm
very,
sitting,
very gross. The conversation about what
yeah, I'm like,
straight women think
ooh,
they have access to gay men's bodies is like, if anyone isn't aware, like the conflict between straight and gay, as far as when it comes to like access to bodies, like you would be shocked at what gay men experience with straight women thinking that they can just like touch. And this is also part of social conditioning. I'm like, women can't harm and women are weak and women aren't a threat and women can't do any of these things. Then it's non-threatening for me to like touch gay men or get access to gay men, or like I can have my gay best friend and treat gay men like accessories, and vice versa, like bisexual women and pansexual women like myself being like accessorized and seen as like you're just going to be this little sexual sprinkling on my boring cishet relationship to make it spicier, type of like
Yeah, and
accessorizing,
like
objectification of queer
accessory.
people.
Yeah, and it's not fair, but it's what happens. And
Mhm.
then after college, of course, I was an economic draftee into the Navy. After my degree, in order for me to get a decent paying job, I had to work for the Democratic Party in California. And after having experience interning in a couple of elections, I knew I did not want to do that. So I went home, and mom supported me for a little while, and then I just decided, uh, since it was in the family history, join the military. So I went and searched out all the military recruiters, and only one of them said, "I'll make you an officer." I said, "You win." It was the Navy. Everybody else wanted to make me a grunt. So I ended up going to OCS and becoming an officer in fulfillment of my need to be male, in society.
well, yeah, like a lot of
Oh.
the stuff that we're talking about like relates to hegemonic masculinity and what that
Mhm.
does to society. Like this is the pinnacle of who you should desire to be.
Mhm.
Um, and
Mm-hmm.
any deviation from that is bad, but also like that relates to why people mistreat those that don't fit that. It's like you have forfeit your role as this pinnacle, and therefore you're garbage because
Mm.
There you
you
go.
you are not deserving of this. um and like it's odd because straight women, like cis het women who mistreat queer people, it's like you're not the top either, but they feel like they're at least above queer
Mm-hmm.
people.
And that's like crabs in
And
a bucket phenomenon.
Yeah,
yeah,
Like,
as
exactly.
well as like because we're all like all of
mhm.
us who do not meet that, and that's including cis het men who don't perform gender in the correct way for hegemonic masculinity, and so they're
Mm-hmm.
also in the bucket. And so anybody who does not meet that is there, and now we're all convinced that we're supposed to be fighting each other instead of like we're supposed to be fighting the system that put us all in the bucket together.
Right,
Like,
which is like that experience of like you have nothing to lose but your chains on people who are like homophobic or anti-queer and or anti-feminist with certain things. Like, do you understand, like the liberation that we're asking for liberates you, like it liberates you there.
Yeah.
Don't you get upset when you think that like you have to adhere to these little tiny like boxes and this is where how to be? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
promise, it's like there's so much freedom on this side, like there's so much joy and light and air and happiness on this side, and I have never felt fucking better in my life than like living out and openly. Now I'm glad not to like segue into this just a little bit, because Kara, I know we were on top of like
Yeah.
trying,
We're going to wrap up in a second, but go with your
but
point.
living openly, I just want to recognize that it is not safe for so many people to live out and openly. I hope that
I live in
there are
Florida.
people, I
Yeah,
know
it's
that,
not
yeah,
safe.
Florida, and as well as all, again, Project 2025, like it's terrifying. It's creeping up on us. It's very, very scary. There are people who are in the chat right now who are questioning or know that they are queer and cannot, even in the United States, like know that they cannot live openly. And I just want to like hold space for y'all. And it can be a really, and I'm trying not to get too choked up. It can be a really painful experience to see some of us talking about being so happy and joyful on this side and being able to live openly on this side. Same thing for people in religious areas, being able to be free and be open and hear us talk about how amazing it is and how joyful it is, because it is truly for me and for us and for Dr. Ben and Kara. I know it is, but it's really, really hard. And I just want to hold space for anyone who's in a position where they can't safely do so.
Yeah, no, I actually really appreciate you bringing that up, Glenda. That is super important and actually a really good kind of segue to the last thing that I did want to talk about, which is resources or advice that y'all have to recommend for people who may not be out or may not really be sure about their identity, or maybe they don't feel comfortable even exploring it or talking about it. What do you think would be helpful, or do you have any recommendations? For instance, the RfR LGBTQ plus resources page has
Yes.
several.
Well,
Yes.
I would say apart from the resources that we offer at RfR, I do want to say, and I'm saying this with like a boulder of salt. Kinksters are everywhere. We are everywhere. And there are, I promise that even if you're in like a kind of smaller town, there is some sort of kink community or swingers by some extent, although swinging is like a separate thing entirely. You can get connected with a local kink group that and be able to go to events that are not about necessarily like it's not necessarily a sex party, it's not necessarily an orgy, but these are people who have deep awareness and understanding about gender fluidity, queerness, sexual expression, sex without fear, guilt, or shame. Again, unless that's your thing. And that's what I recommend. You can I've just been able to get connected with people that do other activism or other events that you can get into the community, get connected through to specific lobbying things or community care. Like the queer community, and we touched on this on the last panel, is fucking spectacular for holding community help and for offering community assistance and community help. So finding those places and finding those spaces, even if it can just be like a small, like my polycule holds like a small weekly, like we just get together and watch movies. That's all we do. It's really great. Like you can sometimes find those little places within your scene that are just really casual and really chill. And just look up your local queer community. If you're in a big enough city, they might even have a magazine. There are different, it's like small
Mhm.
zines and
They do.
publications to get connected.
Yeah,
Great.
I had the good fortune to go to San Francisco State University, which is a BART ride from the Castro. So there was a lot of, though I wasn't out yet, there was a lot of open queer acceptance and a lot of unacceptance. I was going to San Francisco State when Moscone and Harvey Milk were assassinated. So, you know, and it's not a part of history that I'm glad that I wish I had been a part of or was a part of, but it really opened my eyes to the possible violence involved. But since I was already in denial, it wasn't hard for me to just say, I can't let this happen to anybody I know. Uh, Male protector bullshit, as if people can't protect themselves. Right. So, uh, but it was just another thing about finding a community. I technically never found one, in Florida, I have friends, and we have friends that come down, have places down here for the winter, and so, and they come down and we have dinner and things like that. So I have a community, a gay community in a sense, but I have neighbors around me too who are progressives. Believe it or not, there is a group of progressives even here in the old age houses, and so there are people out there. A lot of times it's just scary sometimes to find them because you think you're going to be labeled. Don't worry too much about that, because it's very hard for them to see you if all you're doing is asking a few questions and noticing the red ball cap, or the Biden T-shirt. It's kind of like, if somebody has, that's why I like the little lapel the pins that say, "You're safe with me," basically, because that's a good way for people to find community. And there's a lot of other ways. There's a lot of resources available. RFR has great resources. And I really recommend that if you're having questions or problems with that, granted, it's religiously oriented as far as, but I think that if you have other issues as well, or you can use their resources for other things that you're having problems with. Secular therapy project is something that I like to promote too. But just because, as I said, you can't, in my generation, you can't be any kind of gender, and that includes cis het, without a lot of problems surrounding it. So, you probably do need to get some therapy, whether you think you do or not. So I'm in between therapists right now, so I'm going to babble about that a little bit. But I will say that it's definitely worthwhile. It doesn't matter if you're in your golden years or brand new to the world. Yeah, I think it's something that, if you're having issues with your sexuality or your gender or any number of other things, seek out a good therapist that's a secular therapist. Don't go for those prey on it and it will solve. That doesn't work. Never has.
Also,
So,
issues with sex and sexuality, that extends to anybody who's not religious. Like,
yeah.
we are so fucked up when it comes to sex and sexuality, and you can be raised completely secular and still have a mountain of issues with it. It's one of the number one things our clients come to us with at RFR. So please check out our resource tab, all about sex and sexuality. We've got a lot of stuff to get through.
Yes, we
Yeah.
do. And let me, as we wrap up real quick, I want to give the good doctor a chance to also give us any recommendations for resources or community.
Community, here's great.
Yeah.
Stick around.
Yes.
Go
Good
to
plug.
go to the excursion. Come to the
Yes.
online meetings. Come back to these RfRx talks. There are
We
lots of
didn't even
people.
pay him to say that.
Yeah, I mean, like, there are lots of people
I thought
in
you
the
doubled his
community,
salary.
and
Didn't you double his
yeah,
salary?
and I think yeah, in addition to a secular therapist, I think you can recommend like all the book and video resources in the world, but probably the best thing is just other people that are authentic
agree.
and sharing their life with you. And I think that's really the best way to meet yourself, meet other people. I don't think you can textbook your way through figuring out a queer identity. And it's not saying that, like, there are plenty of people who have published their stories and like a variety of texts on the subject matter. There's plenty of people that have videos on things, and those are great. And I encourage people to like learn about the community, learn about different things. But as far as those things they aren't gonna help you meet yourself necessarily. They'll give you some inspiration. They'll give you a perspective.
That's about it.
But I think collecting perspectives is probably the best way to go. Just meet lots of people, hear lots of perspectives, and be kind to yourself. Get a therapist. Everyone should get a therapist if you can, if you have access to one. I know there's like not a lot of resources in a lot of places. But if you have access to that resource, it doesn't matter like if you feel like you need one or not. I think if you have access, you should utilize that.
Yeah, totally agree. Great advice, everyone. And we did kind of run a little bit over time again, but it was just such good stuff. I'm so glad y'all were here to share all of your stories and advice and insights and resources with us. And I know there are a lot of people in the chat who are saying that it's been helpful. So thank you for that. And we we've got time for maybe one question. So let's do at least a question. And tell you what, if we don't get to your question, stick around for the hangout and we'll continue talking about it there. So let's at least do one though. Okay, so this one is asking, and this is for everybody, so you can all weigh in. This one is asking, how do you get from knowing intellectually that there's nothing wrong with being queer and actually acting in that way? Sometimes it feels like the religious damage has been too much, especially in terms of feeling able to try dating.
That is a really powerful and intense question. And part of me hates my answer because it's so fucking inaccessible and it's living in an area where it's not as stigmatized. It just makes it so much easier. I mean, you can be proud and out in really bigoted areas, but it's like that's exhausting and it's going to wear on you. And there is a reason that I don't live in my home state anymore. Like I wouldn't feel safe to begin with. Even I know that there are thriving queer communities. I grew up in Tennessee. I know that there are thriving queer communities there, and I have many queer friends who live there, and I think about them and it's really tough. But for me, that entirely, I live in a major metropolitan area that's pretty blue. Vegas is pretty blue. And I don't have to worry about like people necessarily being ugly or staring if I'm walking with one of my partners who's like has more gender fluidity or like more feminine presenting. Like I just don't, and that level of like low grade exhaustion of not really having to deal with that, to me, like getting over that really helped me get over any of social stigma. But I also I'm not the best person to that second part, which is how do you get over your own religious indoctrination or your own religious, like, God tells me it's sinful. Leaving the faith was the most liberating experience of my life, and I was so happy to discard those things. I dove off, like that scene in Pocahontas where she jumps off the cliff, the other waterfall, like that was me. It was so freeing. But it is not that for many, many, many other people. It's traumatic and awful and scary, and you still struggle with guilt and shame. And I did not. I fully embraced being a professional slut. So that was a liberating experience for me. It's not the same thing for everybody. But that first part, unfortunately, being in an area
Yeah,
where
you got to be
it's just more
careful.
progressive.
Yeah, that's a good advice, but it's very scary in non-liberal areas
Terrifying.
because I haven't been more terrified than going on a protest march in downtown Tampa because of the book banning of gay books in the public library that the council members did. This is long before they started the Moms for Liberty even existed. This was back in the aughts, and my church, which I was still going to, the Unitarian Church, we had a march um, uh, downtown outside of the council's meeting, and I was flat terrified to be walking in a march that was being filmed, and my face was going to be there, and my people at work would know. Though I was out at work, so I didn't care about that, but it was dangerous. It's literally dangerous. We had two separate um, serial killers in the Tampa area that preyed on gay men and transsexuals. So it's like, oh my God, would I recommend anybody come here? Depends on your situation. I live here because I'm actually comfortable in Sun City, and I live in an area of Sun City which is maybe a little tiny pinprick of blue in the rest of the red, but it gives me an opportunity to show people that we're not evil. So
I really want to clarify for both me and John, we're both cisgender. It is a different experience for us navigating just out as a queer person versus being a trans person navigating out in public space. Like it's not the same. The dangers are not the
the
same.
same. Being trans now is very dangerous. Trans is something that somebody transitioning cannot hide. You know,
especially for trans women. Like the
yes,
rate of homicide, violence for trans women is just so high.
yes,
It terrifies me all the time for my trans women friends.
yeah, my friends as well. It's just awful, and that's something we all have to work on. But since I'm cisgendered, I can't speak for the what they're going through. What I can do is say that we all need to keep an ear to the ground when it comes to problems like that starting to manifest, and see if we can't aid in nipping it in the bud. You know, a lot of us can't do much, but sometimes just speaking up can.
That's also speaking up, and I know, Kara, I know we're going over time. I'm sorry, I just have
Yes.
one more
We
thing.
have
This is
60
why,
seconds and we're wrapping up.
yes, that specific part, this is why you have to speak up and work on yourself when it comes to people expressing any gender that like women are allowed to look masculine and be masculine. Men are allowed to look feminine and be feminine. Women are allowed to have short hair. Men are allowed to have long hair. That and fighting those things helps make the world safer for trans people. Like
Mhm.
that's why we have to discard these rules about gender. You can do whatever you want, but you can't require somebody adhere or perform gender in a specific way because it harms everybody.
Yes, raw
Exactly.
men.
Well said.
And
Raw men.
Dr. Ben, final words.
We're already over time, so I've said a lot already.
All right, those are good final words. We're over
Yeah.
time. We're adding him to the payroll. Okay, well, thank you.
I'll give you my Venmo. We'll talk later.
Yes. Yes.
Give him a
No, that was
bonus for
great.
that.
That was great. We're wrapping up just about on time, but I mean that was so good. I'm so glad we got to have the second conversation and talk about these issues that I mean, it's as you can see, it takes a while to get through every single question because everyone has a different experience and y'all have such rich perspectives on everything. I hope that it was beneficial to the people listening to hear the different types of experiences and insights and advice and resources. I think it was. So thank you for being here, everyone. And we are going to wrap up. Don't forget to join us same time, same place next week. We have Secular Rarity, who will be joining us to talk about the importance of community, generally speaking, next week. And don't forget, in August, we have the incomparable Rob Palmer telling us about are humans actually special in the universe? So look forward to that. And Glenda, do you want to tell people where they can find us on the social medias? I'm
Oh
putting you
my
on the
goodness,
spot.
I do. Wait, let me hold on. I can't function without my Google Doc. If I don't have my Google Doc, I'm
Yes.
totally gonna
This
fuck
is the
this up.
life of an RfRx host.
It's okay. As soon as I do this a couple times, I'm gonna have it down solid. Okay. So, as you know, we are on Facebook. If you go to facebook.com/recovering from religion, that is a wonderful place to be. As always, please feed the alligator rhythm by liking, commenting. It really helps boost our algorithm, which is important because while it shows up in your feed, it may not show up in someone else's feed who needs to see it. So please always just like and comment whenever we come across. It's free. It just takes a second. It really helps us out and it helps expose us to people who need our resources. We have a Facebook support group page, facebook.com/RFR support groups project. And I think it should just be easy to like join. You just click the group, click join. We are on Twitter. I refuse to not dead name Twitter. We are on Twitter, rfr.org. Twitter's a cesspool. It kind of sucks right now, but we're still technically on there. So if you use Twitter and you're on there, also, it's a resource a lot of sex workers are still using. So if you're a sex worker and on Twitter, that can be one of your resources to be able to get connected to our stuff. So we also have Instagram. So for our pretty pictures on Instagram, instagram.com/rfrorg. Kara, I think someone is posting all these in the chat,
Yes.
hopefully. We have a TikTok. We're so hip. Our TikTok is tiktok.com/@recoveringfromreligion. And I also want to plug our, again, YouTube channel, youtube.com/recoveringfromreligion. All of our previous recorded RfRx talks are there. They are amazing. Some of them, one of our most popular that I cannot recommend enough that we touched sort of on tonight is deconstructing purity culture. That's a fabulous talk. Please go watch that. It was really, really good. But we've got some other great talks. If you want to just look by, you can sort by most recent, you can sort by most popular. We've got well over 100 talks. So by all means, go check out our YouTube channel. I think that was all of our social media links.
Yes.
If there's a social media out there, we're on it. So please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment. There
Thank
you go.
you.
Look, all those things.
That was awesome. And I am now forevermore going to be referring to the alligator rhythm instead of the
Alligator
algorithm.
rhythm. Yeah, because you can't
I
say
love that.
algorithm because that will tank your algorithm. You have to say alligator rhythm.
Outstanding. See,
Right.
this is why I knew you would know how to talk about the social medias better than me. Thank you. And awesome job co-hosting. All right, so we are at the end. Oh, don't forget, healing can also come from helping others, and you can volunteer with us to do that if you want to help us out with any of our things like the social media, the RfRx, our helpline, our support groups, moderating the online community, finding the resources, whatever it is. If you have skills, we can use them. So if you want to help other people recover from religion and help with your own healing too, as the case may be, check
Also,
out
it's
our
the Cool
website.
Kids Club. Don't you want to hang out with
Yes,
us a little
you
more?
get to
Don't
be
you want to like
cool.
get? It's the Cool Kids Club.
Yes. So fill out an application for the Cool Kids Club at recoveringfromreligion.org/volunteer. And now we will finally stop talking and let Daryl speak. Dr. Ray, do you have any parting
Hey,
words for us?
well, I kept thinking, I don't have any more parting words than I said the last time these folks were on here. So I will not repeat myself, but I'll say this. I'm poly and have been for decades, but I have trouble putting myself into any of the LGBTQIA because I have never experienced the kind of persecution, terror, fear, cultural oppression. I've just never experienced that. So I don't want to take away from, but I do want to support, and I'm happy and to try and support folks, and that's great. I'm that's where I stand anyway. So I don't know. I'm not disagreeing with people that put themselves in that category as poly. I guess maybe I do fit there, whether I like it or not. I do want I do want to recommend a couple books I think people might find interesting. And that's a book called Sexual Fluidity. It was written quite a while back. It's probably about 15 years old, but it's a long-term study of women and how they changed how their sexuality evolved over a long period of time. And it wasn't about men, so it's not talking about men, but it did show that women really do frequently change a lot in how they view themselves, how they express themselves, how they feel about their sexual identity, including moving into and out of uh, being lesbian or not, or bisexual or not. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff. I won't say the book's easy to read. It's an academic book, but it is a book that really proves a lot of what we've been saying these last two sessions, that we're humans, we're fluid, we change. None of us are the same that we were 12 years when you're 12 years old or 30 years old. We're all constantly evolving, and why not in sex? And of course, the second book I will highly recommend, and that is a book called Sex and God, because everything I heard tonight, I said, damn, I wish people would read that book, because I really did try to explore why this shit is so difficult for us to deal with. And yes, it is my book, but I'm not beyond publicly pushing my own stuff, I guess. And last, and certainly not least tonight, is the fall excursions registration has been open for about a month. I just will tell you, last year we sold out. We've got a new place. We've got more beds this time. I hope we sell out again. I don't know if we will or not. But if you're interested in coming, please get on site, register. If you need help financially, let us know. We've got some money to help subsidize a few beds. But anyway, we would love to see any and all of you at the fall excursion in September. So with that, I will say back to you, Kara.
Thank you, Dr. Ray, and thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, Glenda, for co-hosting, and thank you, Dr. Ben and John, for being on our panel, and Nikki for streaming, and everyone else who helps behind the scenes to make this happen, post-production, and for viewers like you. And also thank you, Rob, for being our awesome Hangout host, which we're gonna go to now.